Wominjeka everyone, Wominjeka meaning welcome. My name is Auntie Julianne and I'm an out of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, and in recognition of doing my welcome to country, I'd like to pay my respects to my elders past, present, future and any elders that were here today, and I would also like to welcome you all here today. The Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung tribe consists of three families, the Nevins, the Terricks and the Wandins, and I'm part of the Nevin family. The three families all descend from one woman called Annie Barratt, which makes us one big family. Annie Barratt is the youngest sister of William Barratt, a pioneer for Aboriginal people in the 19th century, fighting for equality and land rights. I'm here today to welcome you all to the land of my ancestors. We call the land within our tribal boundaries our country. The Kulin Nation, Kulin meaning man, is made up of 5 groups. They are the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung, Boonwurrung, Tanarong, Wathaurong and Dja Dja Wurrung. And to give you an outline of the Wurundjeri country and the area we cover, Wurundjeri country extends from north to the Great Dividing Range, east to Mount Baw Baw, south to the Moorabbin Creek and west to the Werribee River. We cover a diverse range of land from the mountains to the beach and everything in between. Many thousands of years ago, if an Aboriginal person from another tribe wanted to cross our boundary, they would have to sit at the boundary and wait for the Narragadah, which is the headman, or an elder to come past to give permission to cross. Traditional Aboriginal culture was highly territorial, and visitors risked a violent reprisal for crossing a tribal or clan boundary without this permission, and this is how a welcome to country originated in our culture. Traditionally, being welcomed onto country meant you respected Bunjil's law. Bunjil, the wedge-tailed eagle, is our creator, and Wah the crow is our protector. And as long as you looked after the country, you had access to our waterways and our land resources. And when you enter our country, we ask that you respect our resources, our fauna, flora and water, as they are very special to us. And when you are ready to leave, we ask that you leave it the way you found it.
We have lots of council services that support our community. We support families with children, including health services for children and mums, vaccinations, playgroups, childcare, and kinder. We support young people in our community. Through events and activities, we have services that can support people with disability, older people, and carers and family of people with disability and older people. Our libraries support everyone in our community, help people learn new things, and are free to join. We support our community to have fun and be active through events and activities, sport, and recreation areas. We help look after our places and spaces, the environment, and local businesses. We have laws to keep people safe, to make sure buildings are safe, to make sure roads and footpaths are safe, to make sure our places and spaces are safe. We make sure everyone follows the law to keep our community safe and happy. Moonee Valley. It's a great place to live, work, and visit.
Woman Jika, everyone. Woman Jika meaning welcome. My name is Auntie Julianne, and I'm an elder of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people. And in recognition of doing my welcome to country, I'd like to pay my respects to my elders, past, present, future, and any elders that were here today. And I would also like to welcome you all here today. The Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung tribe consists of 3 families, the Nevins, the Terricks, and the Wandans, and I'm part of the Nevin family. The 3 families all descend from one woman called Annie Barratt, which makes us one big family. Annie Barratt is the younger sister of William Barratt, a pioneer for Aboriginal people in the 19th century, fighting for equality and land rights. I'm here today to welcome you all to the land of my ancestors. We call the land within our tribal boundaries our country. The Kulin Nation, Kulin meaning man, is made up of 5 groups. They are the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung, Boonwurrung, Tanarong, Wathaurong and Dja Dja Wurrung. And to give you an outline of the Wurundjeri country and the area we cover, Wurundjeri country extends from north to the Great Dividing Range, east to Mount Baw Baw, south to the Moolally Creek and west to the Werribee River. We cover a diverse range of land from the mountains to the beach and everything in between. Many thousands of years ago, if an Aboriginal person from another tribe wanted to cross our boundary, They would have to sit at the boundary and wait for the Narragaeta, which is the headman, or an elder to come past to give permission to cross. Traditional Aboriginal culture was highly territorial, and visitors risked a violent reprisal for crossing a tribal or clan boundary without this permission, and this is how a welcome to country originated in our culture. Traditionally, being welcomed onto country meant you respected Bunjil's law. Bunjil, the wedge-tailed eagle, is our creator, and Wah the crow is our protector. And as long as you looked after the country, you had access to our waterways and our land resources. And when you enter our country, we ask that you respect our resources, our fauna, flora and water, as they are very special to us. And when you are ready to leave, we ask that you leave it the way you found it.
We have lots of council services that support our community. We support families with children, including health services for children and mums, vaccinations, playgroups, childcare, and kinder. We support young people in our community. Through events and activities, we have services that can support people with disability, older people, and carers and family of people with disability and older people. Our libraries support everyone in our community, help people learn new things, and are free to join. We support our community to have fun and be active through events and activities, sport, and recreation areas. We help look after our places and spaces, the environment, and local businesses. We have laws to keep people safe, to make sure buildings are safe, to make sure roads and footpaths are safe, to make sure our places and spaces are safe. We make sure everyone follows the law to keep our community safe and happy. Moonee Valley. It's a great place to live, work, and visit.
Welcome everyone to the Council meeting on the 23rd of September 2025, which I now declare open at 6:30 p.m. I'd like to warmly welcome members of the public who have joined us tonight, as well as those watching online. As well as being live streamed, the video recording of this meeting will also be available on our website, so attendees in the gallery are advised that your presence may be recorded. I also ask that mobile phones be switched to silent mode during the meeting. A reminder as well to the public in the gallery that, as per Governance Rule 75.1, personal video and audio recordings are not allowed. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which Moonee Valley is located, the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their spirits, ancestors, community members and elders past, present and emerging. We also extend this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We now move to item 2 on the agenda, apologies and leave of absence. As all councillors are in attendance, I don't believe there are any apologies or leave of absence. I note that Councillor Theocharides has joined us via Zoom this evening and will be online. We now move to item 3 on the agenda, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes from the council meeting held on Tuesday the 26th of August be confirmed? Moved Councillor Sypek, seconded Councillor Samantha Byrne. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak? Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. The next item on the agenda is foreshadowing of conflicts of interest. Does any councillor wish to flag a conflict of interest in any item on the agenda this evening? No? Okay, great. The next item on the agenda is presentations. Councillors, I will be making the first presentation and then I will open it up to all councillors. So some great news. Moonee Valley City Council has been honoured with the prestigious Better Outcomes Through Regulation and Innovation Award at the 2025 IPAA Victoria Leadership Awards for its innovative Register to Reunite program. So this initiative, designed to reduce the number of impounded or euthanised animals, encourages residents to register their pets through incentives like discounted first-year registration, waived impound fees and free pet return services. Since its launch, the program has halved the time it takes to reunite pets with their owners and cut impounded dog numbers by 25%. The program's success was praised, highlighting its focus on education over enforcement and its role in easing pressures on animal shelters. The award recognises Council's commitment to compassionate, community-first regulation and the dedication of its city compliance team. I'd like to thank our dedicated team of city compliance for their work and dedication to this cause. It's a credit to Moonee Valley City Council and showcases our community-centric approach to compliance. Thank you. Councillors, are there any other presentations? Councillor Theocharides.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just getting my notes. Sorry.
It's okay.
I did have them up. Apologies, would someone else like to go first while I find my notes?
Yep, Councillor Cosgrove.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to give a brief presentation on the programming that's been happening throughout September at the Clock Tower Centre that a few of us have gotten to go along to. We had the K-pop showcase, K-Next 2025, some student storytelling that was wonderful at the Waka Kiri Award Night, as well as Jamoan, who was there last Friday night with some comedy. And we've had some amazing music performances as well with Dami Im and the Australian Barbara Streisand show, which I missed, sadly, but all reports were great. Audiences have praised the variety, talent and atmosphere that makes the Clock Tower a hub of community celebration and entertainment. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cosgrove. Are there any other presentations before we go to Councillor Theocharides? Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Mayor. On Sunday the 25th September, Sunday the 21st of September, Moonee Valley City Council hosted its first ever medieval fantasy fest at the Canterbury Street Stables in Flemington. This was held as part of Youth Month. It was targeted at young people aged 12 to 25, but it's fair to say that there was a broad cross-section of our community that were there and proactively getting involved. It was but I think the most important thing and exciting for me, it was designed by young people from Council's Avenue Productions Group and funded through the Amplify and Engage program. So it was a free all-ages event that invited attendees to step into a magical world of music, magic and medieval wonder. Some of the highlights were roving performers, an art market, themed workshops and Dungeon and Dragon campaigns. It was incredibly well attended. There were a lot of fantastic costumes from people, and it was great to see how well it went off in the community.
Yeah, and well done to our youth team. Thanks, Councillor Jones. Councillor Theocharides.
Thank you, Mayor. Take two. So I attended yesterday, being Monday the 22nd of September, the official opening of the newly redeveloped Rosehill Park play space in Keilor East. It was our official launch event, which was held, obviously being the first day of September school holidays, which was great because we not only celebrated the completion of the vibrant and inclusive community space, but we also had a wattle themed celebration, Welcome to Country, Yidiki performance by Wurundjeri Elder Colin Hunter Jr., the usual celebratory or ceremonial speeches and some ceremonial tree planting. We had some live music by local artist Peter Westwood. And the great thing about it being on the first day of school holidays is that families got to enjoy and bring their kids down to enjoy nature crafts, face painting, and go home with some plant giveaways. So the play space is part of the broader Rosehill Park Master Plan, which is aligning with the MV 2040 goals to create beautiful, green and inclusive public spaces. And I believe the official launch of that playground now completes the Rosehill Master Plan, Rosehill Park Master Plan, which was also great to hear on the day. Thank you, Mayor. I have one other presentation, and this is my presentation on the Australian Local Government Association's National General Assembly, which was held towards the end of June. So much like my councillor colleagues who have spoken in previous council meetings, I was also in attendance to the General Assembly, along with more than 1,300 local government leaders from across Australia. We all came together in Canberra for the 31st National General Assembly, which again was hosted by the Australian Local Government Association. So the National General Assembly is the peak annual event for local government, and it provides the unique opportunity for local government to engage directly with the federal government, to develop national policy and to influence the future direction of our councils and our communities. This year's theme was National Priorities Need Local Solutions, and along with a wide range of guest speakers from the industry, we also heard from several federal ministers. And there was broad acknowledgement from ministers that councils play a critical role in supporting their communities, and that the role has expanded significantly, as has the financial pressures that councils face, which was great to hear that acknowledgement from federal government. An example of such financial pressure, which was interesting to hear from, was highlighted in the Australian Local Government Association's latest research report, Adapting Together, Local Government Leadership in a Changing Climate. The report outlined that Australia's councils are expected to spend more than $2 billion over the next 5 years to future-proof their communities from changing climate. The upside to that, though, which I was glad to hear, was that the $2 billion, which is to be expected to be spent by councils from across Australia, would result in up to $4.7 billion in avoided costs to communities. So that was great, a great sort of advantage or upside to it. That was great to hear. We also heard from Tim Goldsby-Smith, the co-founder and CEO of AI planning software MyLot. He shared how AI is shaping the future of planning. More specifically, Tim spoke about MyLot's multiple AI agents that are built in within its platform, and highlighting that it's solved current pain points by simplifying the planning for councils and constituents alike, helping constituents to understand and interpret the laws that apply to property, making the planning system more transparent for constituents and giving them more agency.
Got 10 seconds
voice.
left, Councillor. Thank you.
Thanks. And eliminating the arduous part of planning, which is to do with research. I'll finish up by just quickly touching on one of the sort of side...
Would you like an extension, Councillor?
Yes, please, that would be great.
You can have 15 seconds.
Thank you. One of the side sessions that I attended, which was on emergency management, capability and capacity, it was interesting to hear that obviously council to council, they have different types of emergency issues, but it was good to hear from other councils.
Apologies, Councillor, your time is up. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thanks for that presentation. Thank you.
No worries.
Councillors, are there any other presentations? Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'd just like to share the very sad news and acknowledge the passing of a young 19-year-old cyclist from Kensington yesterday. The young gentleman was well known to me and my family and our theatre group, and I just wanted to acknowledge the devastating impact of this on his family and friends and the whole of the Kensington, Flemington community. The site of the accident is a site that has been known to be dangerous for some time, and it just highlights the need for our attention to be paid to the safety of cyclists. All levels of government can do and need to do more to prevent such desperately tragic loss of young life in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa, and condolences to the family. Councillors, are there any other presentations? Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is petitions and joint letters, and we have one item being 6.1, a petition titled Request to Install Speed Barriers on Cuthbert Street, Niddrie. I believe Councillor Samantha Byrne is going to be tabling that one.
Thanks, Mayor. Happy to table it.
Thank you, Councillor. Would you like to read a summary?
Thank you, Mayor. A petition has been received from 29 residents of Cuthbert Street, Niddrie, requesting an investigation into and installation of traffic calming measures such as speed bumps or signage to improve safety. The petition cites concerns about constant speeding on the street and suggests that such measures would help reduce speeding and increase driver awareness. It references Vic Road statistics indicating that traffic calming measures significantly reduce speeding and related accidents. Therefore, the petition urges Council to prioritise the issue and allocate appropriate resources for its implementation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. In accordance with Governance Rule 62.5, I refer the petition to the CEO for consideration. Councillors, do we have any other petitions or joint letters? No? Okay, we'll move on to public question time, and we have received 4 questions this evening. The first two questions are from Penny Hocking, who is joining us this evening. Penny, please come to the lectern and ask your first pre-submitted question. Thank you, Penny.
My questions relate to the draft of the Domestic Animal Management Plan, which is out for community review. In the reporting of statistics on page 4, there are two new terms related to empowerment data that I am concerned with. They are registrable animals and animals with domestic potential. My concern is councils that exclude particular categories of impounded animals in their data are misrepresenting their figures and targets. My questions are, firstly, what are all the exact criteria for an individual animal to be unregistrable and with no domestic potential?
Thank you, Penny. I refer to the CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Penny, for your question. Through the Mayor, Council is required to operate in accordance with the Code of Practice for the Management of Dogs and Cats in shelters and pounds when assessing animals for rehoming and for the associated reporting of this. The code states that aggressive, antisocial animals or animals with known vices such as excessive barking or habitual escape must not be made available for sale. Additionally, Council also reports on animals that are rehomed or reclaimed as required under the local government performance reporting framework. The parameters for this reporting are prescribed within the framework. Using these parameters, cats and kittens that fall into the following categories are deemed unregistrable and are assessed as having no domestic potential: semi-wild or wild, feral, aggressive or anxious behaviors including attacks or bites to people or animals, unassisted death, chronic vices such as chronic illness. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Penny, please ask your second pre-submitted question.
My second question is, if these animals were counted in the impoundment data, how many cats and kittens were impounded in 23-24 and how many were euthanased?
Thank you, Penny. I refer to the CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Penny. Through the Mayor, in 2023-24 year, Council impounded 359 cats and kittens. Of these, 125 were euthanized, with a large portion being assessed as feral, that is 35%. In line with the reporting parameters outlined earlier, in practice, of those 359 cats and kittens impounded, only 34 of them were registrable.
Thank you.
Thank you, CEO, and thank you, Penny. The next two questions are from Ray Burge, who is not joining us this evening. So on behalf of Ray, her first question reads, please describe the stormwater pipe diameter installed in Stewart Street, Gavino Street and Kipling Streets. What era do these pipes date from? Please describe the flow rate they were designed to capture. Please answer in terms of hydrology, not fixed assets. Thank you, Ray. I refer to the CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Ray. Through the Mayor, the diameter and age of drainage assets vary greatly across the network. In Stewart, Naveno and Kipling Streets, the drainage pipes are generally 300 millimeters in diameter. However, they vary between 100 millimeters and 600 millimeters, depending on the specific location. The age of infrastructure also varies greatly, with some assets constructed as early as the 40s and some assets constructed as recently as this year. It should be noted that all drainage infrastructure is designed to cater for the modeled flow rates, catchments, and relevant standards of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next question from Ray reads, are the above pipes still compliant with Victorian building standards, given the increased water catchment created by infill development? Please answer both in terms of pipes and water flow management, not fixed assets. I refer to the CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Ray, for your question. Through the Mayor, as previously noted, all stormwater drainage infrastructure is designed to cater for the modelled flow rates, catchments, and relevant standards of the day. Melbourne is currently undergoing extensive flood modelling. While this work is still in progress, it will inform future hydrological assessments and help prioritise the renewal and upgrade of critical drainage infrastructure to mitigate the adverse impacts of climate change. It should also be noted that the internal drainage systems for all new development sites, including infill developments, are required to be designed to match pre-development runoff rates. This ensures that the development does not have an impact on the existing drainage network. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next item on the agenda is reports from delegates. Councillors, do we have any reports as delegates? Councillor Isa.
Just a brief report that I attended the monthly meeting of the Farnham Street Neighbourhood Learning Centre. I won't report extensively on that meeting now, just to say that the annual general meeting for Farnham Street is going to be held at 2 p.m. on the 14th of November, and I encourage any locals to come along to that meeting because it's a really significant meeting in terms of the personnel of Farnham Street Neighbourhood Learning Centre. So that's on the 14th of November. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Do any other councillors wish to report back? No, if not, we now move on to item 9, which is reports. The first report is item 9.1, Annual Financial Report 2024/25. Councillors, the officer's recommendation is shown on the screen. Do I have a motion? Councillor Cosgriff.
Move the officer's recommendation, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cosgriff. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Jones. Councillor Cosgriff, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will briefly, thank you. This is obviously the annual financial report that we, along with every other council, submit to VARGO each year, the Victorian Auditor General's Office, to ensure, I guess, oversight and sustainable and responsible management of our finances at council. The report for this, or for last financial year, I should say, I think should really be commended, and so should the officers involved in getting us to that place. It shows a really strong culture of financial management, I think, at Moonee Valley. We're in a very strong financial position, not that we've got lots of money to spend, but that we're managing it very efficiently. And I know that the budgeted operating surplus for last year was about 5 million, and we ended up with 23.5 million roughly, which is amazing. And that's due to the work, well, a number of things, but including the very proactive, diligent work of officers in seeking out and applying for grants. So thank you to all the officers involved, and happy for it to be endorsed in principle for VARGO.
Thank you, Councillor Cosgriff. Councillor Jones, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I will just briefly. This is a requirement each year that we submit these and table these reports, but also, more importantly, it's about accountability and transparency. It's about showing the community how, as a council, we are managing the money that is entrusted to us. I think I won't necessarily cover anything that Councillor Cosgriff said, but I will also note that our working capital ratio is 1.54 to 1. So for every $1.54 in assets, we have $1 in liabilities. And so it shows that we can afford to pay our bills and we're in a strong financial position. And I commend officers for managing our money well and putting together this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Councillors, the next report is item 9.2, certification of the performance statement and governance and management checklist 2024/25. Councillors, the officer's recommendation is shown on the screen. Do I have a motion? Councillor Cosgrove.
I'll move the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Jones. Thank you. Councillor Cosgrove, would you like to speak to the item?
Just briefly, Mayor, this is another one of the annual reports, I suppose, that we submit to VARGO along with every other council, reporting back on our performance, I guess, across a number of things. And it's, again, worth commending. I think we've performed there is a unified set of targets and indicators for all councils across the state that we all report back on, and this is part of that process, and we've done, similarly to last year, very well in meeting those targets, and it's good to report that back to the community. And I think the only change really of note was that we had made a slight improvement in our performance on the curbside waste delivery, which I think was through work officers did with our current contractor. So happy to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Cosgrove. Councillor Jones, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, I think it's also worth noting that this comes with a recommendation from the Council's Audit and Risk Committee, so it has been checked by them, and that recommendation has come to Council for us to, move the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. The next report is item 9.3, road discontinuance and sale of land adjoining 147 Park Street and 59 Waverley Street, Moonee Ponds. Councillors, the officer's recommendation is shown on the screen. Do I have a motion? Councillor Cosgrove.
Happy to support the officer's recommendation there.
Thank you, Councillor Cosgrove. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Philburn. Thank you. Councillor Cosgrove, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. So this is in relation to a laneway essentially that runs behind some properties, and a resident has approached us to purchase part of that laneway. The officer's recommendation is to begin that statutory process, which involves putting out the proposal for community consultation. It's actually while it's in my neck of the woods, I wasn't aware of it, but part of it had previously been sold off in 2002, and they're adding a little section so that they can park their car better, and it doesn't affect any of the neighbouring properties as far as I can tell. So happy to commence this process, which of course will be notifying everyone around that area and asking for feedback so that can come back to us.
Thank you, Councillor Cosgrove. Councillor Philburn, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Nothing much further to add other than there's no council assets impacted by the acquisition should it go ahead. The adjoining house, all of the adjoining houses have access through other parts of the laneway. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Philburn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. The next report is item 9.4, right-of-way disposal and road status reinstatement for land adjoining 18 Bayview Terrace and 12 The Parade, Ascot Vale. Councillors, the officer's recommendation is shown on the screen. Do I have a motion? Councillor Phil Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. I move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Phil Byrne. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cosgrove. Councillor Phil Byrne, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Two of these in one night's interesting, but the recommendation is just to start the statutory process to sell off a remaining portion of that laneway. The laneway in question has been discontinued since 1980. A process commenced in 2016 by the owner of 18 Bayview about inquiring into acquisition of the remaining portion of the laneway adjoining the rear of their property. Council resolved to discontinue this extra part of the laneway in 2017. There was an objection regarding access from another property in 2018. But now it's understood that both of those parties have agreed to an amended parcel to be acquired, which protects access to number 12, the Parade, and enables cars to manoeuvre in and out of that rear garage. There's no council assets impacted by the acquisition, and if carried tonight, that process can commence, and that the community consultation can commence around that extra bit of discontinuation. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Phil Byrne. Councillor Cosgrove, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, nothing further to add.
Thank you. Any other councillor like to speak to the item? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's Councillor Barnes, Councillor Phil Byrne, Councillor Samantha Byrne, Councillor Cosgrove, Councillor Isaac, Councillor Jones, Councillor Theocrides, Councillor Adams. All those against? Councillor Sypek. I declare that motion carried. The next report is item 9.5, endorsement of MVCC's submission to the Disability Discrimination Act review. Councillors, the officer's recommendation is shown on the screen. Do I have a motion? Councillor Theocrides.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cosgrove. Councillor Theocrides, would you like to speak to the item?
Yes, thank you. While it was great to see that there's a submission coming from Moonee Valley City Council, and in terms of the recommendations that have been included by Council, I was particularly pleased to see a few recommendations, one being that the minimum requirement for disability action plans include meaningful community engagement. I feel that of current day, that's lacking at a couple of levels, not from Moonee Valley, but other levels of government, and I feel that this is an important recommendation that that needs to go forward. So I'm glad to have seen that go in, and a lot of the other recommendations that you can also read in the report. It was. I feel that as a council, we are not just looking at the minimum requirement. We're putting forward recommendations that go beyond the minimum, which is great to see.
Thank you. Councillor Theocrides. Councillor Cosgrove, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. As a council, Moonee Valley is committed to being as inclusive and as accessible as possible. And so many of the services that we run at council, I think, are are focused on improving access and opportunities for members of the community who might otherwise be overlooked, such as those living with a disability. So I'm very happy to endorse this submission to the review into the Disability Discrimination Act. We've got a very dedicated and passionate team who work very hard to deliver those services and improve upon the services we are delivering for those members of our community. And I was happy to see that we're putting in a submission and the recommendations for regular review of disability action plans, along with their other recommendations. So happy to support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cosgrove. Would any other councillor like to speak to this item? Councillor Phil Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to acknowledge the work of officers in pulling together the draft submission, and also just to acknowledge and thank the work of Moonee Valley's Disability Advisory Committee. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Phil Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak to this item? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. The next report is 9.6, Award of Contract Animal Management Services, negotiation number 100076. Councillors, the officer's recommendation is shown on the screen. Do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
Move the officer's recommendation. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Jones, I think I saw first. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, look, we're in the unfortunate position, I think, where we don't really have a lot of choices when it comes to our animal management services. And it has been a little bit of a frustration over the time that I've been on council that we're pretty locked into a pseudo-monopoly, as our report identifies. That said, we've been working to try and improve aspects of our of the service that we receive through the animal management service with the Lost Dogs Home. I do just want to thank the resident this evening for asking some really pertinent questions around some of our reportable data and what that may seems to exclude, and then how that reportable data can be interpreted. And I really thank Penny for raising those questions, and look forward to some further discussions with officers about how we might be able to address that going forward, so that there can be some greater transparency around that, and so that we can continue to improve our or decrease our rates of euthanizing animals. One of the methods we do use to try and improve our performance in this respect is to really try to make sure that we can return animals to owners before they even reach the Lost Dogs Home, or before they are impounded. And in that regard, we rely on residents picking up on our the opportunities to register animals with us, so that they can be returned directly to families when they stray. So just another plea for people to please register animals. It means that we can get them back to you. So look, there's a lot of areas still for improvement with respect to our animal management, and certainly acknowledge that, as I say, we're in the unfortunate, I feel, position where choice is limited, but I thank our officers for caring for our animals across the municipality, and for responding to requests of residents and councillors to continue to try to keep our animals safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Jones, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Isa covered all the points I was going to mention anyway, so I won't repeat them.
Thank you. Any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Phil Byrne.
Thanks very much, Mayor. Just a couple of points. Obviously, that dogs and cats and other animals bring a lot of people joy, but as the report and recommendation shows, it costs a lot to administer the programs, and I just echo Councillor Isa in encouraging people to get their dogs and cats registered. It'll assist with a speedy reunion, and it'll also keep costs down as well. And hopefully our award-winning processes can start to increase the registrations and reduce the suffering and distress for animals and their owners. And also just a plea to keep your cats in at night as well. They'll be happier, healthier, and they won't be killing wildlife. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Phil Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. The next report is item 9.7, authorisation to award the contract for Sportsfield Lighting FY 25/26 program, in brackets, negotiation number 1000090. The officer's recommendation is shown on the screen, councillors. Do I have a motion? Councillor Phil Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cosgrove. Councillor Phil Byrne, would you like to speak to the item?
Thanks, Mayor. Just briefly, the recommendation is that Council authorise the Chief Executive Officer to award the contract for the Sportsfield Lighting 25/26 program. I note that the authorisation to the CEO will assist with the delivery of the lighting program and minimise the disruption to sporting clubs and users of the parks and facilities. The projects listed for 25/26 include the additional lighting at Fairburn Park, Ormond Park and J.H. Allen Reserve. And the upgrades ensure compliance with the relevant standards for various sporting codes, and also enable more of the sporting grounds to be used for the what seems to be the ever increasing uptake of sport, which is excellent, but brings its challenges as well. And I also just wanted to note and acknowledge the federal government's contribution of 50% of the funding for the lighting at Fairburn Park and Ormond Park as well. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Phil Byrne. Councillor Cosgrove, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to add perhaps that this is part of an ongoing program we have of upgrading Sportsfield lighting. There have been 3 projects, as Councillor Phil Byrne said, identified for this current year's budget, and that money has been allocated to as well. So I'm comfortable in authorising the officer to take over that allocation of that contract, given that we've had some oversight already. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been a crusader for about 15 years about sporting lights within the city, and we've done a great program. And I think a lot of our grounds, a lot of our clubs are very, very happy with our progress, and I think some more to come. The only concern that I have is J.H. Allen. And the reason why is I know the community around there has always objected to having sporting lights. Predominantly first because the parking situation there is absolutely horrendous. When there's a game on, they park on both sides of the street. emergency vehicles can't get down the small side roads, and the community has always asked, fix the parking problem first before any form of lighting or expansion of time around there. The other reason is probably 99% of our sporting grounds are away from homes. At J.H. Allen, there's only a very small local road that separates a house, their front lounge room, and the ground. So when you have lights there, the spillage will go right through their lounge rooms. And I can rest assured that the community are not happy with that, and I've totally in agreement with this. So what I'd like to do is to foreshadow a motion in case this one fails.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Samantha Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the points that have been raised around the chamber. It's quite an interesting one, and I think the take home from me in regards, well, first of all, I'll start with lighting. Lighting up our grounds, I suppose, particularly in winter, it really does increase the amount of participation of particular sports, and that's something that I know around this chamber and previous councils have been very passionate about in Moonee Valley for a long time. And we have problems in winter that when it gets dark at 5:30, kids and adults and whatnot can't train. And there's been a big program, as alluded to earlier, to be able to increase the participation that we have on our well-constructed, beautiful grounds. These particular projects, and it's 2.4 or $2.5 million, I think, for this package of works, 2.409. It's including the three bits of work, hopefully. Hopefully around that figure anyway. They're all different grounds and they all serve slightly different purposes, and they've all have very differing feedback come back through the consultation, which has occurred over a number of years. And I think the learning from the J.H. Allen one is potentially, I think the community might actually be a bit surprised when this occurs, because it has somewhat been in the chamber before, and the feedback that I've heard from communities, they thought that it was done after the initial consultation period, or one of the consultation periods, that it would no longer be going ahead. And I think that this is something that we just need to ensure that we do well in terms of the communication. I see parking issues and lighting issues as different. I think that if there's concerns in regards to parking, we have ways that we can address that, and maybe that's what needs to be pushed forward. The lighting and the spillage is something that's been out for consultation. We've had feedback in regards to it, how that is going to impact residents. I suppose there's a lot of trust in regards to the improved lights that we supposedly can get, and we'll no doubt have feedback. But it is something that is no doubt going to increase participation opportunities for our municipality. And at this point, depending on what other speeches are to come, I will probably be supporting the recommendation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Isa?
Mayor, do you mind if I call for an adjournment briefly, please?
Sure. We will now take an adjournment at 7:19 and return at 7:25. Thank you. Welcome back. We are considering report item 9.7. We're returning from an adjournment at 7:25 p.m. and the item that we are considering is authorisation to award the contract for Sportsfield Lighting Financial Year 25-26 program, negotiation number 100090. Before we adjourned the meeting, Councillor Isa, you had the call. Would you like to continue speaking?
Thank you, Mayor, and apologies for the interruption there. Just needed to clarify something under our new governance rules with respect to motions that, alternative motions that can be put to the meeting. And also just clarifying some of the consultation processes that have occurred with respect to some of the different projects. Lighting does often, particularly sports lighting when it's quite bright, does often create some situations where people are both a bit fearful of the impact that lighting might have, but also sometimes there can be issues with the bright lighting. I've certainly found there to be occasions when lights are installed and the direction of the lights can be a little bit impactful on people, but with some adjustment around that, we've been able to fix the lights. That happened at Debney's Park when the new lights went up. It also happened at the hockey ground when some new lights went up. So I do want to make sure that, you know, when people, if there are issues, that there are often issues that can be resolved through the adjustment of lights. With respect to consultation, there was some consultation with respect to the JH Allen lights in 2023 that I think other councillors have identified that there were a number of issues that were simultaneously bound up in that consultation. So appreciate that there may be some people who still have some reservations, but as I say, hopefully any small or any issues can be fixed with some small adjustments. Certainly the lights at Ormond Park are going to be really gratefully received by the many teams that are training in very substandard lights at the moment. And those lights are also going to, they've been designed and configured for various alignments of the sporting fields, because I know there's been some concern about if the sporting fields were...
Councillor, you have 30 seconds.
...were changed in the future, would the lights still be able to assist? And that's all been taken into consideration. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. We've had Councillor Philburn move the motion, Councillor Cosgrove second the motion, and both have spoken. Samantha Byrne and Councillor John Sypek have spoken, as well as Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Oh, sorry. I will, revert to Councillor Philburn for a right of reply, as there was dissent to the motion. Thanks, Councillor Byrne.
Thanks very much, Mayor. The recommendation in the officer's report is to authorise the award of the contract to the CEO. It's not a report that sort of goes through the merits of various lighting. It's not a report that talks to master planning or anything like that. The officer's report clearly references the significant community consultation and engagement during the annual budget processes, including the public exhibition, invitation for feedback, submissions and public hearing. In terms of the J.H. Allen Reserve, the report clearly says that the project has become a priority due to the limited available of fields for evening soccer. And the same paragraph also says that the lighting aligns with the Soccer Strategy 2022. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's Councillor Barnes, Councillor Phil Byrne, Councillor Samantha Byrne, Councillor Cosgrove, Councillor Isaac, Councillor Jones, Councillor Theocrides and Councillor Adams. All those against, Councillor Sypek. I declare that motion carried. The next report is item 9.8, Capital Works Performance Report Quarter 4 2024/25. Councillors, the officer's recommendation is shown on the screen. Do I have a motion? Councillor Samantha Byrne?
Thanks.
Do I have a seconder? Sorry. Oh, sorry. Councillor Samantha
Can I move
Byrne.
the officer's recommendation, thanks?
Thanks, Councillor Byrne. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Jones? Councillor Samantha Byrne, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, I would. Yes, I will, thank you. So this report is an exciting report. It's the Capital Works Performance Report for Q4 24/25, and it gives a lot of great insight into the capital works that have been undertaken in that quarter, but obviously it also wraps up the financial year, and it's incredibly impressive. Probably the most impressive Capital Works Performance Report I feel like I've seen. The percentage of completed capital works is $55 million, which I think is even more outstanding in the fact that we didn't necessarily have like the big Flemington Hub or the big Flemington Hub or Killer East Leisure Centre to sort of make up a lot of that capital work. So most of them were somewhat smaller projects. So over 90% of capital works completion. Obviously, there's a few reasons listed. Permit approvals and that impact on supply and labour shortages and whatnot that impact that. But I feel like that is just such an outstanding completion of capital works for this year, and I think the team should definitely be commended on that. That's incredibly good. One of the other things that has significantly changed is the reduction of carry forwards, which is something that has been brought up numerous times in this chamber. So I just feel like we're in a good thing with the capital works. I feel like we're just, over the past few years, just significant improvements, and I think that's great. Now just speaking from a more local point, some of the things that were achieved over the 24-25 year in Steel Creek Ward, Hanson and Etzel timekeepers, box and scoreboard, Keeler Road streetscape, some Latham work, cricket net renewals, toilets. They were definitely some of the highlights that occurred. Other councillors might want to touch on some of the things that occurred in their wards. So I've got no issues with moving forward this recommendation. The only other thing that I will quickly touch on is there are, in order to get the increase in project delivery, sometimes there are some swaps of particular projects within the program, and I feel like that's working well. Again, it's not necessarily ideal, but it seems to be one way that we can really hit high marks on our capital works. So, yeah, great report, I think. Ta.
Thank you, Councillor Samantha Byrne. Councillor Jones, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, I would, Mayor. I think the report makes for great reading. There are a lot of great projects and great things that have been done across Moonee Valley over the last financial year, both in terms of new projects and new capital works, but also the renewal works and stuff that is an important part of the job. I commend the team for all their hard work in putting together such a great performance, and also obviously the performance report. I think some positive things for me are the reduction in carry forward projects. I think that's incredibly important because obviously the longer we leave projects, the more expensive they become. So if we're getting most of them done in the financial year they're budgeted for, that is an incredibly good thing. But also the substitution of projects and bringing forward plan works, I think is a good thing. When you've got contractors available and time to spare, it's important to make sure that we are getting work done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. The next report is item 9.9, Council Expenses Report, Quarter 4, 2024-25. Councillors, the officer's recommendation is shown on the screen. Do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
Move the officer's recommendation. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Jones. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
Look, this is one of the most unpopular motions to move, so I've become accustomed to just putting my hand up and moving it to save everybody the agony of waiting for an offer. No one likes moving this motion because it is the money that council spends on councillors, but it is on expenses that are professional development, travel, and our computers and phones. So the resources that we use to conduct our businesses as councillors. I note that the expenses this time do seem to have included, from what I can tell, and I might be wrong, but it looks as though they include the travel expenses and the conference expenses of ALGA, which all the councillors have then reported on back to council about their experiences at ALGA and what the learnings that they had to justify that expense that's undertaken. The other expenses there look to be pretty much our devices, so our phone and our computer, which I think if we didn't have and people couldn't contact us on email and phone, it would create all sorts of issues. So that's the expenses for this quarter. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Jones, would you like to speak?
Just briefly, like Councillor Isa said, it's probably not a particularly exciting or popular motion to move, but it is important for the sake of transparency that the expenses that we incur as councillors are shared so that our local residents know what money is being spent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. The next report is item 9.10, adoption of the revised council expenses policy and councillor gift policy. Councillors, the officer's recommendation is shown on the screen. Do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cosgrove. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the item?
Thanks, Mayor. And we've worked really hard to make the review of these policies worthwhile to fix some of the issues that were identified primarily through the IBAC Operation Leo report, but also our experience as councillors in sort of navigating the difficult legislative requirements and expectations around our expenses and gifts. I really thank the officers who have tried to work some magic to make these policies reflect both the practicality and the transparency, and then work with the Local Government Act, which tries, it's an imperfect act in terms of trying to regulate potentially bad behaviour. It's really hard to regulate against bad intent or bad behaviour, which is what we're trying to do, and it's just hard to get that right. So thanks to the officers who've worked hard to do that. Look, it still puzzles me as to why there aren't model expenses and model gift policies, because 79 councils across Victoria are putting in place these policies, and I'd really love to see some application of best practice brought to the table so that we could all have the best practice policies that we know to be the best practice policies. But we've worked really hard to get something that we hope is best practice. One of those things that now is in place that I'm really pleased to see is a register now of all of the events that we attend as councillors that are in fact paid for by council because they are community events. And I have been asking for many years, in fact, for some kind of transparency around that. And I'm really pleased that we now have that transparency and that register in place. The other thing that's quite important for councillors, and it's probably something that's more important for councillors than community to really get our heads around, which is that the gift policy no longer has a reasonable hospitality category where councillors are not expected to necessarily declare things. And that is a really critical improvement, and it was an improvement that's come out of the IBAC investigation because of some misunderstandings and misinterpretations of that reasonable hospitality category, because it's quite an ill-defined or undefined concept. So that's now gone from the gift policy, which is, I think, an improvement, and we are now, as councillors, expected to declare all of those offers if we take them up, and we should only be taking them up under the policy. It's very clear we should only be taking up those offers if there's not going to be the creation of any misperception or any perception, of conflict. And so that's now been spelt out really clearly for us in the policy. So hopefully this is best practice. It might be that this can become a model for other councils if it does work as intended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Councillor Cosgrove, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to add my thanks particularly to officers who I know worked really hard to, I think it was something like 17 pages down to 6, to make what it seems simple in principle, but in meeting the obligations of the Act, and then in real life, in the real world experience of meeting people for coffee and going to events where there's food and all sorts of things, it became quite messy and confusing, and they've done an enormous amount of work to simplify it, and it is much more clear, and hopefully will lead to more consistent reporting from us as councillors. So yeah, thanks to officers for that work.
Thank you, Councillor Cosgrove. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. The next report is item 9.11, adoption of the councillors' candidature for state or federal elections policy. Councillors, the officer's recommendation is shown on the screen. Do I have a motion? Councillor Cosgrove?
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Philburn? Councillor Cosgrove, would you like to speak to the item?
Yes, Mayor. This is to address the occasion where a councillor might choose to stand for candidacy or run a state or federal election, and it's to address a gap that was left when we adopted the Model Councillor Code of Conduct. Most councils previously addressed these situations in their Code of Conduct, but that's not in our Model Code of Conduct anymore. This provides a set of, I guess, guidelines and guardrails for us really as councillors to make sure that we're not, in doing something very legitimate, running for another level of government, we're not in breach of the Act or the Code of Conduct in any way, in particular that we're not using our position as councillors, misusing our position for our own benefit. So really important that we don't do that. As councillors, we're privy to obviously confidential information and we have lots of privileges, as was discussed in the previous report on expenses, our phones and our computers and all sorts of things. So we all want to make sure that we don't inadvertently misuse that position should we run at another election for a different level of government. So I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation for guidelines on how to do that, and I thank them for their work in putting it together and also for stepping through it with us, should any of us choose to do that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cosgrove. Councillor Philburn, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thanks, Mayor.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. The next report is item 9.12, Psychosocial Safety Program to discharge council's legal duties. Councillors, the officer's recommendation is shown on the screen. Do I have a motion? Councillor Isa?
Happy to move the officer's recommendation. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Theocharides? Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm really looking forward to participating in this program that's been put together by officers to help us to understand the new regulatory framework around psychosocial safety and for us to make sure that we meet those obligations. Certainly a really interesting area of occupational law regulation. How does a political context as well then apply that really interesting concept in law? So I'm really looking forward to talking with colleagues about how we can almost do the impossible of making politics meet that psychosocial safety threshold.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Theocharides, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, please, Mayor. I echo Councillor Isa's comments, but also am glad to see, well, not just because it's a requirement, but also because I think that psychosocial safety is important aspect that I think a long time coming. It's been a long time coming since its inclusion in WorkSafe legislation and laws. I love the fact that this motion speaks to putting in place parameters around psychosocial safety for executives and for councillors as well. I think that psychosocial has not had its own voice for long enough, and I'm glad to see its inclusion in legislation, but also inclusion in identifying risks and coming up with controls for the higher levels, which is great to see.
Thank you, Councillor Theocharides. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Yep, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, item 10 on the agenda is notices of motion, and we have none listed on tonight's agenda. So we'll move on to item 11, urgent business. Councillors, do we have any urgent business? If not, we will move on to item 12, confidential items. We have 3 confidential items listed on the agenda this evening. The officer's recommendation to close the meeting to the public pursuant to Section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to consider confidential items 12.1, appointment of Audit and Risk Committee independent member and chairperson, 12.2, sporting infrastructure, and 12.3, CEO Performance Review 2024/25 is displayed on the screen. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Jones.
I'd like to, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative motion, please, if possible.
Yes, Councillor Jones, what is that motion, please?
I'll wait till it's displayed on the screen.
Sure.
The motion that I'd like to move is that Council resolves to vary the order of business so that item 12.2, sporting infrastructure, is considered in open council before the meeting is closed to the public. Part B, resolves to close the meeting to the public pursuant to Section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to discuss the following matters as they are considered confidential under the terms of Section 3.1. 12.1, appointment of Audit and Risk Committee independent member and chairperson, contains confidential information relating to personal information, being information which, if released, would result in the unreasonable disclosure of information about any person or their personal affairs, as the report contains personal information of a prospective committee member. And 12.3, CEO performance review, which contains information, and I can't see what the rest of that wording is. Bear with me a second because it's covered by a Zoom link.
Councillor Jones, when you start reading that, could you start again at 12.3, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. 12.3, sporting infrastructure. 12.3, CEO performance review contains confidential information relating to.
Sorry, Councillor Jones, was that
12.3?
Yeah, but 20. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
You didn't say 2024.
CEO performance review 2024-2025
Yes, thank
contains confidential information relating to personal information, being information which, if released, would result in the unreasonable disclosure of information about any person or their personal affairs, as it includes personal information about an individual employee. And part C of that motion is... hang on, I'll put that here. Thank you, Councillor Isa. Directs the officer report for item 12.2, sporting infrastructure, provided to councillors in advance of this meeting, be released publicly as part of the council minutes for this meeting to ensure transparency and enable public scrutiny of council's decision making. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barnes. Before we begin debate, just a reminder to councillors, the debate must be relevant to the motion before the chair. That is, whether item 12.2 should be considered in open council. Councillors must take extra caution when debating, and the debate must not disclose any confidential information contained in the report. Councillor Jones, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, just briefly, and I am mindful that I can... of what information I can and can't share. I feel that item 12.2 deals with matters of strong community interest, and that outweighs the potential under section 3.1. I don't think that point applies to item 12.2, and I'm happy for items 12.1 and 12.3 to be discussed confidentially. I can't really say much more than that, but that's why I'm moving that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Barnes, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Good time for my computer to go blank, but I'll go off the screen over here with Hamish, Councillor Jones. That's everything I was going to say over here. Phil's just dropped off. But I'm pretty much on a line with Councillor Jones. I think everything should be transparent and put out there for the public to have a look at, and for us to be held accountable for what happens in here. So I concur with Hamish. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Samantha Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Jones, for moving this. I suppose I do strongly believe in accountability and transparency, and I think that our first thought should be what can be open to the public, and like we've seen in previous reports tonight, there is opportunities obviously for things that can't be disclosed to be kept confidential. So it is obviously pretty hard to talk on this when we can't actually talk on it because it's confidential. But in terms of whether or not, like this is obviously an officer's recommendation, there is obviously an officer's recommendation for it to be closed to the public, but I think that sitting around this table, we can also put a lens on that sporting infrastructure is all that we can say at this point in time. And I think that, as Councillor Jones said, there is strong community interest in sporting infrastructure. And
Councillor, I'll just remind you to confine the debate to the motion, whether it's
sporting infrastructure?
Yes.
Sorry, what wasn't I confining?
No, just speaking to whether the item should be in confidential or not.
Yeah. So sporting infrastructure, and from what's listed here, council business information, being information that would prejudice the council's position in commercial negotiations if prematurely released. Council's business information intentions may be compromised if information from the report is in the public domain. I do feel like there could have been a way that potentially could have not occurred, and I'm of the opinion that this motion makes everything a lot more transparent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Samantha Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Phil Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. Agree with the strong community interest in many of the items. I don't support the amendment. Obviously restricted as to the going into the details as to why, but just on the matter of the potential, there's a whole series, if not a swathe of potential commercial arrangements and chessboard, sort of all sorts of things could potentially happen in this. So I think it's well within the realm to discuss the item confidentially. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Phil Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Cosgrove.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Jones, for putting up your proposal and thoughts. I think, for me, upon consideration of what we are meant to be discussing, I think for the most robust debate among councillors to be had, which it should be, and for the ideas to be properly tested before making a decision, that it's appropriate that it remains confidential at this stage. I do agree that what council does is of interest to the public and should be disclosed at the appropriate time, and I hope that will be the case, but at this point I strongly believe this should remain confidential for ideas to be properly tested between us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cosgrove. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Isa.
Thanks. Yeah, look, I appreciate the alternative being put forward because we do all aim for transparency as much as we can in the chamber, and that's come up a number of times tonight. I won't be supporting the alternative, however, because some of the reasons that Councillor Phil Byrne and Councillor Cosgrove have mentioned, but strong community interest doesn't trump those other reasons that information is sometimes required to be confidential. In this case, the information's being safeguarded by Clause A of the definitions of confidential, which refers to putting council business, prejudicing council business in commercial negotiations if prematurely released. And I think that's a really important phrase of the rationale here, because it's the premature release of information that can create misunderstandings or commercial sensitivities or even political weaponisation. And so there's a strong reason for not for maintaining some confidentiality in the short term, where there is an intention, obviously, of sharing things down the track. And look, this is a judgment call always. Sometimes people around the chamber are keen for information to be confidential, sometimes not. It's always a judgment call with respect to the particular sensitivities that that are at play. I mean, I know that I've argued in the chamber over this council term that certain information ought to be, particularly with respect to IBAC and the IBAC report, that information ought be released. So I think it is a case-by-case judgment around whether the reasons for keeping the information confidential are satisfactory. And I think in this case it's really important in terms of the timing and not exposing council to premature misunderstandings. I think it's really important in this case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. I have detected dissent and we haven't foreshadowed a motion. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm 50-50 on this alternative. I've heard the conversation around the chambers and I think there's arguments for and there's arguments against. But at the end of the day, this information will become eventually unconfidential and the public will know, and I think the public will then decide, well, I probably can't, I can't understand, I can't say what the public will, but the public will judge on whether this was to be confidential or non-confidential. And at the end of the day, that's who we serve, like Madam Mayor. We serve the community. And I think the community have put us in this position to be stewards, to be the caretakers, and we've got to make that decision. So, yeah, I'll just one more councillor to talk, so I'll just wait for that conversation and I'll have to make up my mind.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item or foreshadow a motion?
Should this motion fail, I'd like to foreshadow the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak? I have heard dissent, and so Councillor Jones, would you like a right of reply?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, just briefly, Section 3.1 of the Act does allows us but doesn't require us to classify information as confidential. Tonight's motion is simply asking us to apply discretion in favour of openness to our community, where I do believe it is reasonable to do so. I think there's a risk that the community will perceive that council is making decisions behind closed doors, and I'm just doing this because I've always been a strong believer in transparency personally, and there's been some disagreement around the table, and we'll see how the vote goes.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's Councillor Barnes, Councillor Samantha Byrne, Councillor Jones, Councillor Sypek. All those against? It's Councillor Phil Byrne, Councillor Cosgrove, Councillor Isa, Councillor Theocharides, Councillor Adams. I declare that motion lost. Councillor Isa, you have foreshadowed a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Can I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cosgrove. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion? Or,
yeah.
Sorry, yes, the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
I won't repeat the debate we've just had. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Isa. Councillor Cosgrove, would you like to speak? No? Great. I'll put that to the vote. Oh, sorry. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion?
Can I ask that we split the vote for each section confidential item?
I'll just confer with governance. Thanks, Councillor Jones. I don't believe that splitting the vote is appropriate, so I will now put the... I'll ask other councillors who would like to speak to the item. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's Councillor Phil Byrne, Councillor Cosgrove, Councillor Isaac, Councillor Theocrides, Councillor Adams. All those against? Councillor Barnes, Councillor Samantha Byrne, Councillor Jones, Councillor Sypek. I declare that motion carried. This is where we say goodnight to those watching the meeting via live stream and to those in the chamber at 8:05 p.m. The next council meeting will be held on Tuesday, the 28th of October 2025. Good night.